All right. Today I'm talking to Hazel Moon, who's been really kind enough to come over and be interviewed in part of a running series that I've got running of local people in Denmark who fly under the radar of a lot of maybe of the wider community, but play a really pivotal role in a lot of people's lives in the local community. So, Hazel, get straight into it. Where are you from, and how did you end up in Denmark?
Hi, and thanks for asking me. I was born in East London, in Clapham, really working class family, and was brought up by activists. I come from a long line of activists and war resistors. So, for me, activism is not separated from life. It's kind of what you do as a working class or underclass person. And so I'm used, my whole childhood was spent having table thumping debates, and that type of thing is the norm for me. So I was traipsing around after my dad as soon as I could walk, basically following him around, helping him out, doing missions. So what else was it? And how did I end up here? Well, we had to emigrate because my father had kept getting bronchitis, and we were told that if we didn't leave England and go to either Western Australia or South America, he wouldn't be getting his pension. So we had family friends who had already come out from London, so we came out here, and I came to Denmark mainly because I wanted my kids to go to the Woodbury Boston School. I was really keen on their style of education because I'm a bit of a fan of alternative education, and it seemed to be the closest to the Summerhill model, which I was pretty keen on, which is an English model. And when my relationship with the kids' dads separated amicably, I was homeschooling before then, and I thought, well, I'm not going to be able to homeschool and be a practicing artist, so my next best option was Woodbury, so we basically moved down here because of that. We'd lived in Walpole for a few years beforehand.
Yeah, right. So you moved down from Woodbury Boston School, which is I actually taught there.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, for a couple of years, and that was so much fun because I came down to do the Steiner School and then ended up at Woodbury.
Okay.
Yeah. That was really good fun. It was awesome. So that's why you moved down to Denmark, and is that the what's kept you here now? Because obviously your kids are grown up, and what's held you into the local community? I suppose what I'm asking is, are you in it for the long haul with Denmark?
I would have thought so a couple of years ago, but probably not so much now because of the huge changes that have happened in Denmark over the last, say, 10 years or so. There's been just a humongous demographic shift here that's pretty well largely gone uncommented on, as far as I can see. Enormous amounts of displacements of underclass people, and a deliberate move to clear out the riffraff and the ferals and whatnot. And I've got lots of how am I going to say this without getting my arse sued? Pretty convincing information from several locals that it was actually a deliberate form of eugenics was initiated in this town, probably post blockade as well. I know there was a lot of issues around the blockaders coming into town, but I think that there's been a definite eugenics kind of agenda operating here for probably since white folks came here, I'd say.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing. So, whereas I do think I would end up here, I'm not so sure now. I'm not so sure that and not just only Denmark, but what's happening politically in Australia. I'm feeling a bit like a political refugee at the moment. Iceland's looking really good.
Yeah, I do know what you mean. I do wonder what I'm doing here myself a lot of the time, and thought I'd sort of found somewhere. Same thing when I came down. It felt really, but I could feel it was on a razor's edge. And I think the most indicative thing for me recently was riding around and just watching the destruction of the sustainable development, the Centre for Sustainable Development, and watching the old, like tile roof be ripped off, just thrown to the ground, replaced with tin. All the solar passive stuff ripped out, replaced with a row of air conditioners. And that was like a real sign. And and finding out recently from a couple of drunk Deepal guys from back in the day, like 88, 89, that they completely drenched the whole of this region from Albany to Denmark in heptachlor everywhere. And they got paid for how much spray they got rid of. So you can imagine what was happening.
I think that was fairly widespread though.
Just mental. So, okay, I suppose you've sort of answered the question here, but one of the questions I've got is how welcoming has the local community been, wider community, been to your ideas of social justice?
Interesting. I've just had a couple of years off the grid to really ponder the sort of the long view, and I think myself and plenty of other radicals have been no platformed in this community pretty consistently. So not at all welcoming. I mean, it's an increasingly middle class town, upper middle class town really now, and there's a huge amount of no platforming going on here. I mean, I've had comments edited out of minutes and on several occasions. So I think there's a lot of there's a move to really gatekeep the narrative, which is so classic neoliberal tactics, to gatekeep that narrative so that only one version is allowed, and anybody who has a difference of opinion is either ridiculed or shut down, and that seems to be the general rule. I think it's worse here in the country than in the city. Personally, I think it's more entrenched here, and those sorts of old school attitudes are way more entrenched here. I don't think you'd get away with it as much in the cities. That's just my theory. Does that answer?
Yeah, so thanks for that. So I'm, like I said, I first came down here and I was teaching at the Steiner School, which was a certain group of people, and I was like, wow, I really like this. And then some weird politics went down there, which again, I don't want to get sued either. And I moved over to Woodbury, which had its own politics, but it was fun, it was really fun, and people really trying to do a positive agenda. So of course the people I was around, and then you sort of see these things start to impinge in that really start affecting you, sort of decisions. It really, and I've just found it's getting more and more and more in your face, and some things seem to be deliberately malicious, and that's a horrible. Cause I don't like seeing that about other groups of people, that people will be purposely, malicious in their actions, purely out of because you're not in my group, and take it out on some trees or take it out, just to go, look what we can do. And I was always wary of thinking that, but you can't ignore it. It's just so in your face. And I feel the same way about whether I want to stay here, but then I feel like then they've completely won. I don't know.
I think they won a few years ago.
Yeah. I suppose going back to being no platformed, and I know that you do a lot of unpaid advocacy work for a lot of different people around town. And do you have any access to local services, or are you excluded from that as well? That was something I want. Well, say are GPs friendly, or service, like government services, are they aware of your role, and do they acknowledge that role, or do they again not acknowledge it?
We do keep a list of friendly people within agencies. We do what we call a fluffy referral, which means we suss it out really well before, because to do an inappropriate referral, as I'm sure you know, can cause harm, actually, a lot of harm. So I'd rather do no referral at all and try and do some ad hoc community-based support thing than to refer to an agency that has a blame the victim policy, which pretty well ditto all government agencies for that one. And you know, obviously there's great people working within those agencies, but to what extent can they bend those rules? So I tend to work outside of the systems, because most of the systems are actually perpetuating harm, you know, particularly the mental health system. You know, there's massive human rights issues happening in this country right here, right now, in this area, and that are going completely unremarked upon. Even the you know, the mainstream heads of departments of mental health and whatnot of mainlands will admit that there's major issues, major problems in the Mental Health Act, major problems in the Advocacy Act, and they've said that they're going to try and redress that to an extent, but the proposals aren't going to go far enough. So we've got a fluffy fascism situation here. That's what I think our government is. It really is not a democracy by any stretch. I think democracy is a great idea, it just hasn't happened yet. So I'm really reluctant to refer unless I know that it's going to be good. And frankly, in most cases, it's not going to be helpful at all. So in the past, the collective started the emergency relief. Well, we didn't start it, but we got emergency relief thanks to a lot of locals. Corinne Glory was one who got us that to start with. And that was fantastic for a long while. We were the lead ER agency in this area, and you know, DCP and others were referring to us. They wouldn't support us in any way in terms of funding for admin or whatnot. So we've never had an office. We've never had a space allocated, even though we'd requested it several times. And I don't want one now anyway. I'm not going to work that way anymore because it doesn't serve me. It's just a waste of everyone's time. It's easier to work stealth on an ad hoc basis and a damn sight more effective. That's just what I've come to after, you know, 40 years work, I guess. Yeah. So I'm not relying on any mainstream services to support us in any way. Although we have been referred to by, you know, DCP and other agencies. But, you know, quite tellingly, they'd never give us any of the support we needed, but we're happy to refer dozens of people to us.
Right. Okay. Well, that's so it looks like you've had to set up your own system.
Absolutely, and this is what's happening now everywhere.
Yeah.
People are, particularly in terms of mental health. You know, I work with, you know, not in Denmark, but in West Australia. There's some really experienced counsellors, and we're kind of forming a bit of an ad hoc scenario where we're doing completely away from the mandated, punitive, blame the victim models that are really the only choice for underclass people here. And really, you know, in the anarchist mode, setting up your own system rather than trying to fight a behemoth system, which is a complete waste of energy, to just completely ignore that system and set up an alternative system elsewhere. This is happening everywhere now, but of course it's all stealth because of litigation. You know, the usual story.
Do you find any active obstruction from government agencies in what you do?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the main thing is to sort of wipe out things we say, just disappear what's said. I mean, that's happened several times to me in this town. I've been on, you know, highfalutin committees and whatnot, and find out that things I've said have actually been edited out of the minutes, which is actually illegal. But that's par for the course, I'm finding. And again, I reiterate, I think in a small town it's a lot easier for cabals of power to develop. There's no checks and balances. And my first take on Denmark when I got here was, it's like a lot of big fish in little ponds, you know? and I see a lot of empire building here. I guess it's clearer to see in a smaller town. Of course, this goes on, I'm sure, in the cities, but as an activist in the city, I found it a heck of a lot easier than so much easier than down here. And particularly working in welfare, because I mean, environmental activism is hell sexy, you know, and very middle class. So it's a no-brainer. You can easily get the help. But if you're working in welfare, it's a completely different story. That's not sexy at all. And you're dealing with the deserving and undeserving poor paradigm, which is still running the show in this country, I have to say, big time. We need to drag ourselves out of the late 18th century, like really soon, because so much harm is being done and people are disengaging in droves, and I don't blame them. Anyone who has any sort of self-respect would not engage with these punitive blame the victim systems. It's all blame the victim. It's all about you made, you know, that they'll get a phrase, some kind of postmodern phrase like, oh, it's all about the choices you make, and then that phrase will be used to abuse people, basically, telling them that their trauma is because of choices they've made, with an utter you know, refusal to look at structural issues.
Yeah, well, that's the so after that, no, that is exactly what I'm feeling, and like I say, it does definitely feel it's not by accident.
There's no way it's by accident. No way.
So, like you say, there are some good people working within agencies.
Always.
Yep. So, for instance, we've got the Labour victory on the weekend, and I see a lot of people pulling an Obama, going, "Oh, it's going to change everything," and I'm just like, "Oh God, more disillusionment that, like, you know, coming for some people." So, despite all that, do you see any glimmers of hope? Do you see any glimmers of hope?
The glimmers of hope I see are around grassroots direct action, about people getting so pissed off with systemic abuse that they're starting to organise themselves separately and outside the behemoth structures. That's the only glimmer of hope I see. I don't see. I think all of we've lost we have no left in this country, no left at all. We've got the neo-libs, and by neo-lib I mean Liberal, Labor and the Greens. They're all neo-libs as far as I'm concerned. And we've got the alt-right. They're the options here. What's happened to our left? We don't have one. And all the neo-libs are all singing from the same hymn sheet. There's a deafening silence from all of them on several key issues that are human rights issues. It's appalling. I'm not celebrating a Labor win. I mean, they're slightly better than the Liberals in terms of they'll put a halt on the Row 8, but that's about it.
Yeah, I feel it's like with the Labour Party, it's like their shtick is a bit friendlier than the Liberals, whereas the Liberals just appeal to the inner bastard that is in everybody. That's what they're appealing to, like this, the dark. You know, it really is that. And Labour tries to be a bit fluffier about it, but they do exactly the same.
Exactly.
Carry out the same policies, and use the same language again, and that really strikes a chord with me. The undeserving, deserving poor. You know, having a disability, and just, you know, having a disease, and the difference from being on one side of I've experienced it both sides, where I've been on the other side of the counter. I can never work for the government. I've tried, and it's just, I get chewed up, and you're instantly asked to compromise.
Exactly.
Immediate day one, usually. You're put in a situation where you have to compromise your integrity.
And there's the end of your authenticity.
Yeah, gone. And it's immediate, and it can be a small thing, can be you know, but and you can feel it, you know. And I can't do it. So okay, yeah, I hope for the future is maybe it is hope is like a curse, you know, because it's sort of like it's a way of denial, isn't it?
Exactly.
Denial. So pretty much an obvious question, but how do you feel like the current larger political issues globally as regards with the feeling around Donald Trump. There's no middle ground, it seems, with him. How do you think that's, or do you think it's feeding into and affecting the mindset of people locally, and is it emboldening certain groups, I suppose?
I think to an extent it is, but I think the rise of the alt-right is a blessing in disguise, frankly, because I would rather be dealing with the overt nature of the alt-right than the covert nature of the left, the lost left, or the neo-libs. Like, I find it extraordinary. I mean, I'm obviously not a major fan of Trump, but extraordinary that people are ignoring Clinton and Obama's record, what they actually did. And because they're neo-libs, they scrub up nice, they say all the right fluffy words. People think they were good people, but they did diabolical shit, But they did it by stealth, and that's what I think the problem with the neo-libs and the new so-called left, which isn't left at all, is that people are lulled into a sense of complacency that things are being dealt with, but they're not. It's business as usual with a fluffy fascist veneer. Whereas at least with the alt-right, when it's so obviously, shockingly bigoted and horrendous, it's so overt, at least then there's an opportunity of a radical opposition to form. But while people are appeased and so easily satisfied with utter lies from war criminals, frankly, utter war criminals, and while people are happy to be appeased by how somebody looks, what somebody says, there's less chance of a revolution. I think although it's hideous, but I think there's more chance of a groundswell sort of revolution under the alt-right than under the neo-libs.
I remember the whole thing around the craziness around 2012, and some people thinking the world was going to end and all this stuff. But I never bought into it. But I've had the feeling that maybe it's since the global financial crisis, or I don't know. There's been some kind of shift where nobody's bothering to even hide under a rock, or they just.
Sorry, I forgot to ask the last.
Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot the last bit of your question.
No, but that's right. Yeah, they're just trying to. They're just going, like you said, they're just going, fuck it, this is what we think.
Yes.
You like your lifestyle, we're going to go and steal this oil. You okay with that?
Yeah.
And then enough people are going, yeah, I am all right with that, actually.
People are more emboldened, you're right, I think.
Yeah, and it's, very, very...
But better out than in. I'd rather be dealing with overt than covert any day. Any day.
Absolutely. Yeah. I totally agree, because then everybody knows where they stand.
You know your enemy, but if if the smiling assassin model of the the Turnbulls and the Clintons and the Obamas is the really dangerous model, I think.
And I think that I remember when I was at university, I was in my sort of late 20s, so that would have been late 90s, and I couldn't believe it, because I come over from the UK, and I was at anarchist activists over there. I came here and I was like, wow, I could end up getting locked up really fast here, and for not really much reason, and not even going to try to achieve much. It's such a contained, even the protest was so limited in its scope because it was so middle class. But when I was at uni, like, there was this delusion. They went, oh no, racism's been sorted out. And I was like, are you fucking joking? What are you talking about? And you mentioned class, and they go, there's no class in Australia. Oh, that's just you English, you poms about that. I was like, no, oh no, look around. But so I spoke, all right, coming back to that, do you feel that politics in its current form is capable of solving any of the issues that we face?
Absolutely not. I see it as rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. I'm an anarchist. I believe in direct grassroots action with no big daddy telling us what to do. I don't need a big daddy telling me how to live.
Well, that answers that. That's good. So like, yeah, when I you know, the way like like really serious, massive environmental issues that are so in our face. Like I go down and look at the inlet and I think, I reckon there should be far more birds here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it sort of looks like it's all a bit dying. That's the, anyway, I don't know. I'm not an expert, but I just get this, I think it should be a lot more stuff going on here. Then you see hideous, you go through that new estate, the Springdale estate, and the nightmare runoff coming off of that. And then, like I said, I found out about heptachlor, and it persists, they don't know how long.
A half-life of God knows.
Don't know.
Ditto.
Still there from the 50s.
That are still there now.
Yeah. So then I'm like, you know, so you think, oh, I'll grow chickens, and even if I want to go, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm just getting too cynical, but the climate change thing, and it just seems like a popularity thing, environment. It's just become fashion, and yeah, it's. I've got 5 kids. You've got kids, and it's difficult not to pass on that cynicism. So, what can you know? Can you speak to that? Because that's hard.
Yeah, that is really hard. I guess, you know, family comes first for me. So I'm not really. I've never been interested in putting all my eggs into some kind of future that might not happen. So my life is very much, you know, appreciating here and now what we've got. And I mean, the reality is, frankly, you know, we could all drop dead tomorrow. And I guess I know that sounds simplistic, but that's the only way I can get around it, is just to really treasure the amazing people I've got in my life, and to really drill that in, you know, that just the huge appreciation of right here, right now, what we've got. And then if we do drop dead tomorrow, we won't have too many regrets. That's the best I can do, I'm afraid. That's the best I can do. Yeah, and make the changes where you can, you know, do what you can. Like, I really like the permaculture principle of start on your own back door and work out. So even if you can't, you feel overwhelmed by kind of behemoth structures and whatnot, there's probably something you can do in your own block, you know, there's probably something you can do for the person who lives next door to you, you know. And so I'd rather be active and practical than, I don't know, allowing myself to get ground down or overwhelmed by these behemoth kind of structures that would be quite happy if that happened, if all dissent was overwhelmed. Yeah.
And I get that. I think that it's, like you say, being overwhelmed by these overwhelming structures, and also coincidentally, it seems, in the media or wherever you look around, there's overwhelming issues that they just go, oh, you can't deal with it, and it's a very good way of distracting people from what they can do. Absolutely. Locally.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And people just go, what's the point? It's just all about me and my little.
And I think that's
cabal.
very deliberate too. You know, I mean, look at the number of cooking shows. What's all that about? You know. And I think the message there is, oh, don't worry too much about what's happening in the big world. Just, you know, reupholster your lounge and it'll be good, you know. Or this season's colours, you know. Don't forget these seasons, you know. Oh, should I paint the kitchen charcoal or peppermint this season? You know, it is your main concern, you know, rather than actually really confronting what's actually happening to real people. And that gets back to prejudice and class. And someone said to me once, Australia, because we do have a different system in Europe than here. I think they haven't got the blue blood thing here. And somebody once said, oh, we've got 2 classes here. One of the few Australians that would admit there was a class system, because they seemed to have a knee-jerk problem about even admitting that, was that there's 2 classes, owning class and underclass, and that makes sense to me. And I guess you were talking about you had an illness, and how I think prejudice is something that you don't, I mean, I know this has been said before, you don't get it until you've experienced it. And if you don't belong to the group that's being prejudiced, you will never experience it. So people can, you know, and this is what I'm really looking into at the moment, the idea of microaggressions, the idea of how we use these little nasty little death of 1,000 cuts to keep someone in a box, or if you're feeling someone's making you feel uncomfortable, pulling out one of these strategies, gaslighting, minimizing, all that stuff to just put them right back in their box. That's something that I'm really almost obsessing about now, really trying to unpack that more and more for myself, and how that is considered normal. That's the norm in our society, is that that's okay. If anyone's got a different opinion, to just ridicule them. And, I've been on the receiving end of that my whole life, really. And as have so many other people have had a bit of difference, particularly people with things that are invisible, that you can't see. Like, I didn't know that you had anything going on. I've only been recently diagnosed with ADHD as an adult, but obviously I've had it all my life, and I'm doing a retrospective, still in this deep retrospective, about how that's impacted on me, and how, other people treat me because I might be a bit boisterous or a bit hectic or whatever, and how other people, draw conclusions about that and treat me differently, and just extrapolating that out for all, particularly people who have invisible illnesses and constraints, Yeah.
Well, my experience with that, with the rheumatoid arthritis, was just I don't know if I said it, but it was just going on and dealing with government agencies, being on the other side of the counter, and actually having in a situation where I had someone who went and came in, advocated for me. It was really bad, it didn't work very well, but they came in there and there was just this conversation going on about me. And I was just stood there, and I'm like, I've seen this before, and I felt really bad for a person when I watched it happening. But whoa, this is crushing.
It doesn't feel.
No, this is just.
So
and you feel, your power's gone.
Absolutely.
And what's going to happen? Like, it's not good, not a good feeling. It's like being in a jail, in a public jail. Very odd feeling. But I don't want to end on a complete downer. So I know you've got some stuff coming up. Ridiculous.
We're working on Ridiculous 3. We've done 2 so far. They're exhibitions that are based. They raise money for the community collective's Wood Appeal, and also because we provide about 6 to 8 households in firewood every year, if we can. It's getting more and more expensive, of course. So it's art on recycled skateboards. So people could, at this stage, because we're so hands-on, we haven't got the Facebook page up yet, but we've got lots of skateboards sanded and ready. So if anyone wants one, maybe contact me on Facebook. So basically start painting now. We haven't nailed a venue. We're looking at May, and all the money goes towards the firewood or the food that we cook and dish out food. Yeah. So it's we hope to raise about $4,000.
And when?
We're looking at May, but we haven't been able to nail a venue, and that's another issue. We haven't got a decent gallery in this town. That's something that needs to be addressed for the last 20 years, especially now the CSL's gone, because that was definitely the best space. It's a real shame.
Okay, well, that's good. I look forward to that, and I'd like to thank you ever so much for agreeing to let me ask you some questions, and the answers have been awesome. Great to hear. Yeah, it's awesome.
It's great to have it.
Awesome. Thanks ever so much.